My name was once recorded in the rolls of the administratum, buried among a billion other meaningless names, somewhere in the endless archives of Hive Tarsus. I was nobody, a scribe among dust, copying numbers, tallying grain shipments, and marking the deaths of men I would never meet. Each day bled into the next beneath the hum of ancient cogitators and the endless drone of servitors. But there came a moment, a single heartbeat, when I felt something shift. It was so small, so unremarkable, that no one else would have noticed. A fleeting thought that slipped through the cracks of my weary mind: what if I just left? You see, in the Imperium, escape is not an act of rebellion, it's a sin. To abandon your duty is to abandon the Emperor himself. And for that, there is no mercy. But I had long stopped believing in mercy. The prayers we mumbled before our shifts felt like mockery. The saints on the walls stared down with hollow eyes. They said the Emperor protects, but all I saw was the machinery of obedience grinding flesh into devotion. It started when I found the scrap of parchment. A forgotten page, tucked between old shipment records, a letter, half-burnt, written in a trembling hand. It spoke of a ship. A freighter bound for the outer rim. It whispered of silence beyond the astropath's reach, of systems uncharted and dark. The last line was smeared with blood, but I could still make out the words, "Freedom waits beyond the light." That night, I didn't sleep. The hum of the hive became a roar in my ears. The smell of oil and decay clawed at my lungs. Every sound, the hiss of steam, the distant thunder of factory machines, felt like a warning. My heart pounded with a thought I couldn't kill. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe the Imperium wasn't a cage because it was powerful, but because we believed there was no outside. Days turned into weeks as I studied, waited, and watched. The freighter's route appeared in the ledgers again, a vessel of the Navis Imperialis, due to depart for a frontier world on the edge of Segmentum Obscurus. I memorized the schedules, the guard shifts, the timing of the cargo haulers. Each detail etched into my mind like sacred scripture. And with each day, the weight of what I planned grew heavier. You don't simply leave the Imperium. Every citizen is marked by their labor, their service, their faith. Even the dirt beneath your fingernails belongs to the Emperor. To walk away is to challenge the very order of mankind. Yet the thought of staying, of dying at a desk, nameless and forgotten, felt worse than any punishment I could imagine. The first time I spoke my plan aloud was to my friend Loran, another scribe who'd lost 3 fingers to a misfed data slate. He laughed, but not cruelly. It was a tired, hollow sound. He said no one escapes, not from the Imperium, not from duty, not even in death. They'll find you, he whispered, eyes darting to the ceiling as if the Vox spirits might be listening. Even if you make it past the docks, even if you reach another world, the Emperor's gaze never leaves you. But I had already made my choice. The next rotation, I burned my records. Erased every trace of my existence from the archives. It was a dangerous thing, tampering with Imperial data. A single misstep, and I would be declared a heretic. But when I watched my name vanish from the system, when the light of my identity blinked out like a dying lumen, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: silence. The kind that feels like truth. For the first time in my life, I was invisible. That night, I stood at the highest point of the hab block, staring out over the endless hive, the towers like teeth biting into the polluted sky. The air shimmered with ash and distant lightning. Somewhere below, the chanting of the ecclesiarchy echoed, 1,000 voices crying praise to a god who would never answer. I wondered if he could see me now, if the Emperor, locked in his golden corpse, knew that one of his children had dared to dream of escape. And then the whisper returned, cold and certain in the back of my mind. Freedom waits beyond the light. After I erased myself from the records, I thought I had done it. I thought I was free. No more data trails. No servitor logs with my name. No overseer calling out my number in the morning labor roll. For the first time, I existed outside the system. I was nobody, and that anonymity tasted like victory. But the Imperium doesn't lose people. It hunts them. The first sign came the next day. I returned to my usual corridor, blending in with the crowds, pretending to be just another scribe heading to work. That's when I saw the black-robed figure standing by the checkpoint. A man of the Adeptus Arbits. His helmeted gaze swept over the crowd, impassive, scanning faces. They always looked for the smallest signs, a twitch, a hesitation, a heartbeat out of rhythm. I kept walking, head down, pulse pounding in my ears. Then his vox clicked, and I heard the words that froze my blood. Sector 4, possible data anomaly. Cross-reference incoming. It wasn't my name. It couldn't be. My name didn't exist anymore. But the timing, it was too perfect. They knew something was missing. Somewhere in the machine, a gap had appeared, a silence that didn't belong. I slipped away before the checkpoint sealed, heart hammering like gunfire in my chest. For the rest of the day, I didn't return to my quarters. I hid among the workers in the lower manufactorums, where the air was thick with smoke and no one asked questions. There, among the forgotten, I found others like me, men and women who existed in the cracks of the hive, unregistered, invisible, breathing borrowed air. One of them called herself Marin. She had the look of someone who'd seen too much, eyes sharp as a knife, voice rough from years of recycled air. When I told her I'd erased myself, she didn't look impressed. "You didn't disappear," she said. "You just made the machine notice you." Her words unsettled me, but she was right. The Imperium wasn't just a government. It was a living organism, a million worlds connected by data, faith, and fear. To vanish from its records was to create a wound, and wounds demand attention. Marin told me she knew of a way out. A smuggler, working the lower docks, shipping contraband out of the hive through trade vessels. It wasn't safe, but nothing was. Every passage was lined with purity checks, servo skulls, and auspex scanners designed to root out heresy and mutation. One wrong step, and you'd be atomized before you even reached the ship. But I had already crossed the point of no return. That night, I followed her through the lower tunnels. The air there was damp and hot, filled with the distant hum of machinery and the stench of rust. The walls were alive with cables, like veins pulsing with electricity. Marin moved like she belonged there, weaving between the shadows. I trailed behind, clutching the stolen identity tag she had given me, a forged designation belonging to a dock worker long dead. We reached the old transit lift that led to the cargo platforms. The gate creaked as it opened, revealing a shaft that plunged into the depths of the hive. Somewhere far below, the engines of the void freighters rumbled like sleeping beasts. Marin turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Once you step on that dock," she said, "you're not a man of the Imperium anymore. You're prey." Her words lingered as the lift began to descend. The hum of the machinery vibrated through the air, mixing with the pounding of my heart. I thought of the stories, of deserters caught by the Inquisition, dragged back to their home worlds to be burned alive as examples. I tried not to imagine their faces. Halfway down, the lift shuddered. The lights flickered. For a heartbeat, everything went silent. Then came the sound, a metallic echo from somewhere above. A grinding noise, sharp and deliberate. Marin drew her breath sharply. "They're scanning," she whispered. I looked up. Through the mesh ceiling, I saw it, a servo skull, hovering in the shaft, its eye glowing red as it traced beams of light across the walls. The machine's spirit of surveillance, searching for anomalies. My forged ID buzzed faintly as it synced with the scanners. I held my breath. Seconds felt like eternity. Then, mercifully, the light dimmed, and the servo skull drifted away. We didn't speak until the lift reached the bottom. When it did, I realized something chilling. There was no turning back. The moment I stepped off that platform, I would no longer exist, not as a citizen, not as a servant, not even as a man. But even as fear clawed at me, a strange sense of exhilaration bloomed inside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living by someone else's decree. I wasn't serving, obeying, or praying. I was choosing. I didn't know then that this was exactly what the Imperium feared most, not rebellion, but choice. And as I walked toward the smuggler's dock, I couldn't shake the feeling that the machine had already adapted. Somewhere in the endless data networks of the administratum, something had awoken. Something that wanted me back. The cargo platforms stretched out like veins beneath the hive, lit by the sickly orange glow of lumen globes that flickered with exhaustion. Freight haulers rolled across cracked stone floors, their engines roaring as they dragged mountains of supplies toward the freighters towering in the gloom above. Each one was a cathedral of iron, vast and holy in its own way, ships built not for beauty, but for endurance. I followed Marin through the maze of containers and mechanical noise until we reached a shadowed alcove behind a pile of empty fuel drums. A man waited there, thin, tall, his skin pale from years beneath artificial light. His eyes had that look, the hollow gaze of someone who'd long ago stopped believing in redemption. "This is him," the man rasped. Marin nodded. "He's clean. No augmetics, no tags. Wiped himself from the ledgers." The smuggler gave me a smile that wasn't a smile. "Then you're either brave, or already dead." His name was Corvin. He'd once served aboard a rogue trader's vessel before his captain vanished into the warp. Since then, he'd made a life ferrying the unwanted, deserters, criminals, and dreamers, to the edges of known space. His ship, the Vagrant Star, wasn't much to look at. But it flew, and that was all that mattered. Corvin told me that our passage wouldn't be easy. We'd board hidden among the maintenance servitors and cargo crates, smuggled out as machine components bound for refit on a distant world. If the Arbits inspected the manifests, we'd be executed before we could even blink. But if luck favored us, we'd slip through the void untouched, free at last from the Emperor's chains. As he spoke, I caught sight of something on his wrist, a tattoo of an Imperial aquila, half burned away, the wings charred into black scars. He noticed my stare and laughed softly. "Once," he said, "I swore my life to the Imperium. Now I just try to live in the spaces between its lies." We moved quickly. The sound of the hive above was a constant reminder that time was running short. Dock patrols shifted every 30 minutes, auspex sweeps every hour. Marin handed me a respirator mask and gestured for silence as we approached the ship. The air grew thick with the scent of fuel and ozone. And then I saw it, the Vagrant Star. It hung like a beast in the shadows, its hull scarred from years of travel, its engines glowing faintly with the light of dormant plasma coils. It wasn't a warship, but there was something predatory about it. The kind of vessel that didn't belong to anyone, and went wherever the Imperium didn't want to look. We waited for the loading servitors to finish their routines, their metal limbs clanking as they stacked crates of supplies into the cargo hold. Corvin signaled us forward, and we slipped into the shadows between two massive storage containers. Every step felt like the edge of a knife. One wrong sound, one flicker of motion, and we'd be done. The inside of the freighter was colder than I expected, a labyrinth of metal corridors and machine hum. The air tasted stale, recycled 1,000 times. Marin led me to a cramped compartment behind a maintenance hatch where the smell of oil was suffocating. "Stay quiet," she said. "Once we're in the void, we're ghosts." I sat there in silence, listening to the rhythmic pulse of the ship's reactor. Each beat felt like a countdown, to freedom or death. For a brief, fragile moment, I let myself believe we'd made it. That soon, the Imperium would be nothing more than a fading memory behind us. But then, somewhere deep in the ship, a low tone began to hum. Faint at first, then louder. It was the sound of a data link establishing an automated transmission. Corvin cursed under his breath. Identification protocols. Someone's trying to access the ship's registry. I froze. Could it be a routine scan? A random audit from the port authorities? Or had the machine already found me? Corvin rushed to the control panel, tapping in commands. "This isn't the Arbits," he muttered. "Signals too clean. Military encryption. Looks like the Adeptus Mechanicus." The Mechanicus. The tech priests who worshipped the Omniscia, and who saw all technology as divine. If they were scanning the ship, it wasn't for smuggled goods. It was for heresy. And a man who had erased his imperial identity would be the purest heretic of all. The humming stopped. For a moment, everything went still. Then Corvin turned toward me, his expression pale beneath the dim lights. They know someone doesn't belong on this ship. My heart sank. All the planning, all the risk, and yet, the Imperium had already reached across the stars to touch me. Marin looked at me, her jaw tight. We can't turn back now. I wasn't planning to, I said quietly. The ship's engines roared to life. The deck shook as we lifted from the dock, the pressure of ascent pressing against my chest. I could see the hive world shrinking below through a small viewport, a polluted wasteland of lights and smoke. The world I'd known all my life, now nothing more than a dying ember beneath the void. But as we broke through the upper atmosphere, the darkness outside seemed wrong. There were no stars, only a shifting shadow, vast and silent, moving against the void like something alive. Corvin stared at his monitors. "That's not possible," he whispered. "There's nothing registered on our sensors." And then, from somewhere deep within the static of the ship's Vox systems, a voice began to speak. Cold, metallic, familiar. Designation error detected. Data anomaly traced. Return to compliance. I felt the blood drain from my face. Because that voice wasn't coming from the ship. It was coming from me. The sound was mechanical, hollow, but beneath it there was something disturbingly human. A tone of authority, familiarity. As if the machine wasn't just repeating code, it was speaking to me. Corvin's fingers flew across the controls. "It's in the internal Vox network," he said. "Not a broadcast. Something's piggybacking on the ship's systems." Marin's hand went to her weapon. Could it be a Mechanicus virus? He shook his head. "No. This feels alive." The lights flickered. The hum of the engines deepened into a growl, and every lumen globe along the corridor began to pulse in rhythm with that voice. Data anomaly traced. Subject identity mismatch. The Emperor protects. My heart pounded as I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't outside me anymore. It was inside, echoing through my skull like a memory I couldn't shut off. For a moment, I saw flashes, images I couldn't explain. A data terminal, rows of binary code, my own name, flickering across a screen before vanishing into static. Then, another name, stamped in red. A classification number, a location tag, a tracking signature that pulsed like a heartbeat. I realized, with sickening clarity, that I hadn't erased myself completely. Somewhere, deep in the endless archives of the Administratum, a fragment of me had survived, a corrupted line of data, screaming for reconciliation. The system wanted to fix me. To correct the error. Marin grabbed my shoulder. "What is it?" I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. "It's me," I finally whispered. "It's looking for me." Corvin turned pale. "Then it's not the Mechanicus. It's the Nuspheric network, the machine spirit memory of the Imperium. You're still in its system, boy. You can't just delete a soul the Emperor already owns." That sentence felt like a blade twisting in my gut. I wanted to protest, to say that I was free, that I had erased my name, that I didn't belong to anyone. But in the Imperium, belonging isn't a choice. It's embedded in your existence, from the moment you're born. Every prayer, every data entry, every breath you take feeds back into the machine that governs humanity. I hadn't escaped it. I had only awakened it. The ship's cogitator screens began to fill with streams of text, Imperial data code, cascading endlessly. Words appeared like prophecies. Locate, reclaim, cleanse. Corvin shouted, its overriding navigation. He slammed his hand against the controls, trying to sever the transmission. Sparks flew. The smell of burning metal filled the air. Marin cursed. "What's it doing?" He looked back at us, his voice trembling. "It's setting a course, back to Tarsus." Panic seized me. No, you have to stop it. I can't, Corvin shouted. It's controlling the ship's spirit. It's overriding everything. And then, just as suddenly, the lights dimmed. The hum quieted. The ship fell still. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, suffocating, the kind of silence that comes before something terrible. Then a single lumen flickered back to life above the doorway, bathing the compartment in pale light. Standing in the corridor beyond was a figure. At first, I thought it was a man. But as it stepped closer, I saw the truth. Its body was a fusion of flesh and machine, pale skin stretched over cables and circuitry, its eyes glowing with the same red light as the servo skulls from the hive. Its voice was calm, precise, and horribly familiar. You should not have left, Scribe Theta 9942. The name hit me like a hammer. That was the designation I had erased. The one that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Marin raised her pistol, but the figure didn't flinch. Who are you? She demanded. The thing tilted its head. I am correction. Corvin's hand went to his sidearm. Machine spawn. How did you get aboard? The creature turned its gaze toward him. I did not board. I was always here. In the circuits. In the data. In the faith that binds man to his duty. Its voice carried a strange serenity, as though it wasn't a monster, but a priest. I realized, with dawning horror, that it wasn't a machine built to kill. It was built to remind. The figure's gaze shifted back to me. You sought to erase yourself, it said. You cannot. The Emperor remembers. It reached out a hand, mechanical, humming with faint energy. Return to compliance, Scribe Theta 9942. You belong to the light. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I grabbed Marin's arm. We have to go. Corvin shouted something, and gunfire erupted. The corridor exploded in flashes of light. The creature staggered but didn't fall. The bullets tore through its body, revealing the writhing cables beneath. It didn't bleed. It simply reconfigured. Its voice didn't rise, didn't scream. It only said one word, calm, inevitable, final. Reclamation. The ship shuddered as alarms blared. Systems rebooted, engines roared, and the walls seemed to come alive with electricity. The corridors pulsed like veins carrying data instead of blood. Marin fired again, shouting over the chaos. We didn't speak. There was no time. Every lumen flickered with the pulse of a dying machine spirit. The ship wasn't dying, it was transforming. The walls that had once been steel now pulsed faintly with red light, veins of circuitry crawling across them like vines. Every door hissed open and closed with mechanical will, as if the Imperium itself had reached into the ship to reclaim what was its own. Marin's voice was sharp, breaking through the chaos. This way. The escape bay. Corvin staggered behind her, one arm pressed to his side where the creature's energy pulse had grazed him. He was bleeding, real blood, not machine oil, but he kept moving. I followed, lungs burning, the voice of that thing echoing endlessly through the Vox system. Return to compliance. The Emperor remembers. We burst into the escape bay. Rows of life pods lined the chamber, most inactive, some flickering with power. Marin rushed to one, typing rapidly at the console. Manual override, come on, come on. Corvin slammed his hand onto the emergency release, but nothing happened. It's locked. It's controlling everything from the main cogitator. That's when the lights dimmed again, and the voice returned, stronger than before. Freedom is heresy. There is no beyond. There is only his will. And then, the sound of movement. From the shadows of the corridor, more figures emerged, dozens of them. Not soldiers, not servitors, something in between. Their bodies were thin, half flesh, half metal, their eyes glowing with the same mechanical red. They moved with the silence of things that no longer remembered how to breathe. Marin raised her weapon. Back, she shouted. But there was no place to go. Corvin turned to me. There's a manual pod, unregistered. Behind the service panel. We ran. Metal shrieked as the door buckled behind us. The half-machines followed, their movements jerky but relentless. I could hear the sound of metal feet scraping closer, closer, closer. Marin wrenched open the panel and revealed the pod, small, barely big enough for one. She shoved me toward it. Go. What about you? I protested. She smiled faintly. Someone has to make sure they don't follow. The door behind us exploded inward, throwing sparks into the air. Corvin fired into the darkness, shouting for me to move. I climbed into the pod, heart pounding. The air was cold, stale. I could barely see through the flickering light. Marin's hand pressed against the hatch. Her eyes met mine. If you make it, remember what you saw. The hatch slammed shut. A moment later, the pod fired. The G-force crushed my chest, the sound of the ship falling away into silence. For a moment, all I could hear was my heartbeat, fast, ragged, human. Through the small viewport, I saw the vagrant star shrinking behind me, engulfed in light as its reactor finally collapsed. A bloom of white fire tore through the void, swallowing everything. I should have felt relief. I should have felt free. But instead, all I felt was dread. Because even as the ship vanished into the explosion, the vox in my pod crackled softly. Escape acknowledged. Trajectory logged. Return protocol initiated. My blood ran cold. How? I whispered. How are you still? The voice interrupted, calm and final. There is no outside the Imperium, scribe Theta 9942. The Emperor sees all. I screamed. I tore at the controls, trying to disable the vox, to shut it out. But the voice only grew louder, filling every inch of the pod, vibrating in my skull until I thought it would split apart. And then, silence. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw stars. Real stars. Thousands of them, cold, distant, beautiful. For the first time, I was truly beyond the reach of any world, any law, any god. I should have felt awe. But instead, a single thought echoed through me. If the Imperium can still see me here, then maybe it isn't watching from the stars at all. Maybe it's watching from inside. The vox crackled one last time. The Emperor protects. Then everything went dark. The pod drifted through the void, its systems flickering weakly. Power reserves, 7%. Oxygen, 6 hours remaining. Communication array, offline. For a brief, blissful moment, I thought I'd done it. I thought I had escaped. I remember laughing, a sound that felt foreign, like it didn't belong to me anymore. It echoed inside the metal shell of the pod, thin and cracked. For the first time, there were no orders, no hymns, no endless prayers to a corpse on a golden throne. Just me, and the cold eternity of the void. But the thing about silence is, it doesn't last. It waits. And then, it begins to whisper. It started as a faint clicking sound from the vox panel. I ignored it at first, a dying circuit, maybe interference. But then the clicks began to form rhythm. Purpose. Language. I leaned closer, listening. Scribe. Theta. My breath froze. No. It couldn't be. You are not free. I slammed my fist into the console, tearing out the vox wiring until sparks filled the cabin. The sound stopped. But the words, the memory of them, stayed. They echoed in my skull like a curse. I tried to focus. Navigation, trajectory, anything to pull me back to reason. The pod was adrift near an unmarked sector, no beacon, no Imperial channels detected. Just empty space stretching infinitely in all directions. A perfect void. And yet, I wasn't alone. Something moved beyond the viewport. At first, I thought it was debris, a shard from the vagrant star maybe. But then it moved against inertia, turning, aligning with me. I couldn't see details, just a faint outline, like a shadow swimming across the stars. It followed me, always at the edge of vision, always distant but never gone. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time has no meaning in the void. The oxygen levels dropped to 3%. My head grew heavy, thoughts slipping like water through my fingers. I began to wonder, had I really escaped? Or had I died on that ship, and this emptiness was just another punishment? That's when the dreams began. In the haze of half-consciousness, I saw faces, Loran, Marin, Corvin, all staring at me with blank eyes, their voices speaking in unison. "You cannot flee the Emperor's light." I screamed, tried to wake, but the POD's walls pulsed around me like a living thing, veins of light crawling through the metal. My breath came shallow, my vision blurred, and then, in the distance, the shadow returned, closer now, vast, its shape blotting out the stars. I reached for the manual controls, tried to alter the POD's course, but the thrusters didn't respond. Instead, the display flickered to life, showing a single sigil burning bright across the screen. The Aquila, the double-headed eagle of the Imperium. And beneath it, words scrolled across in golden script. "There is no escape from the Emperor's mercy." Tears filled my eyes. I don't even know why. It wasn't fear anymore. It was the crushing realization that even in the black void between galaxies, the Imperium owned me. My mind, my memories, my very perception of freedom, all shaped by the thing I thought I'd escaped. The POD's systems came online again, but I hadn't touched a thing. Course trajectory, recalibrated. Destination, unknown. The shadow drew closer, revealing itself not as a ship, but as a vast cathedral of metal drifting through the stars. Its hull was covered in chains, prayers carved into its surface, each letter glowing faintly like embers of faith. It was an Imperial ship, but not like any I'd ever seen. This one was silent, ancient, and, somehow, watching me. A signal burst through the static. Scribe Theta 9942. Prepare for retrieval. I tried to scream, but the words died in my throat. The POD's engines flared, pulling me toward the behemoth. I pressed against the glass, desperate, praying to any god that wasn't the Emperor. And in that moment, I finally understood. You can run from the Imperium. You can hide your name, burn your records, erase your existence. But you cannot escape the gravity of faith, not when it's written into the soul of humanity itself. As the shadow swallowed me whole, a thought whispered at the edge of consciousness, not from the Vox, but from somewhere within. Freedom was never outside the Imperium, it was the lie that kept you serving it. And then, once again, there was only darkness. I was lying on a cold floor, smooth, metallic, impossibly clean. A faint light pulsed above me, not from a lumen strip, but from veins of glowing text running through the ceiling. They weren't written in any tongue I recognized, but when I stared too long, my mind began to understand. Each word was a prayer. Each symbol, a command. The ship wasn't just made of metal, it was made of faith. I tried to stand, but my limbs were heavy. My body trembled, not from weakness, but from something deeper. The air itself felt alive, thick with whispers that pressed against my skin. They weren't sounds, but thoughts. A constant hum of devotion. And then I realized, it wasn't the air. It was the ship. Every rivet, every plate, every servo in its walls pulsed with litany and purpose. The machine's spirit wasn't bound to it, it was it. I was standing inside a cathedral that thought, that remembered. In the distance, I heard footsteps. Metallic, measured. I turned, and froze. A figure approached from the darkness. Tall, draped in robes the color of dried blood, its face hidden behind a mask of bronze. Tubes ran from its neck into the ceiling, feeding it like veins. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. Designation confirmed. Scribe Theta 9942. You have wandered far from your assigned duty. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was being gripped by an invisible hand. You sought freedom, it continued, stepping closer. You sought to flee his light. But tell me, where can one flee when the Emperor's gaze burns across eternity? Its mask tilted slightly, studying me like a scientist observing a failed experiment. Your rebellion is an error in the code of faith. And errors must be rewritten. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. What is this place? I whispered. The figure paused, and though its mask was motionless, I felt it smile. You stand aboard the ecliptic sanctum, a vessel forgotten by the living, remembered only by the machine god. We retrieve those who stray too far. The ones who believe they can escape the Imperium. It turned away, motioning for me to follow. Come, you will witness what freedom truly costs. I didn't want to follow, but something in me obeyed. Maybe fear, maybe the ship itself. We walked through corridors that twisted like veins through a heart. Every wall was etched with scripture. Thousands of skulls embedded in the metal watched as we passed, their empty sockets glowing faintly with blue light. Their lips moved silently, reciting endless prayers. Finally, we entered a vast chamber. My breath caught. It was a hall of mirrors, but the reflections weren't mine. Each panel showed faces, men, women, children, frozen in expressions of terror, pain, and revelation. Some screamed silently, others wept. Some whispered words that echoed faintly from the glass. We tried to leave. There is no outside. The Emperor is everywhere. I staggered back, shaking my head. What are these? The robed figure raised a metal hand. Echoes, it said. Remnants of those who believed as you did. Their faith was not erased, it was repurposed. One mirror flickered, and my own face appeared. But not as I was, not tired, not afraid. This version of me was calm, smiling, eyes filled with the same red light that pulsed through the ship. It spoke, my voice, but not my soul. There is no escape, because there was never anything to escape from. I screamed and turned away. The figure stood still, unblinking. Freedom, it said softly, is not a place. It is surrender. You ran from faith, scribe Theta. But faith is the air humanity breathes. You cannot run from what you are. The whispers in the walls grew louder. The faces in the mirrors began to chant, hundreds, thousands of voices merging into one deafening prayer. The Emperor protects. The Emperor sees. The Emperor owns. I fell to my knees, hands pressed against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming from outside anymore, it was inside my head, pounding like a heartbeat. And through the agony, I realized the terrible truth. This ship wasn't here to kill me. It was here to convert me. To erase my doubt. To make me part of its faith, not through devotion, but through design. As I looked up, the bronze-masked figure reached down and placed its cold hand on my head. Do not resist, it whispered. You will find peace soon. And then, everything went white. That's what it was like when I opened my eyes again. I was back in the hive. The air thick with smoke, the endless droning of machinery in the distance. The same corridors, the same metal, the same smell of oil and sweat. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all. The ship, the figure, the mirrors, the whispers. Just a fever dream. Then I saw my reflection. I was standing before a rusted sheet of metal, warped but still reflective. My face stared back, and at first, it looked like mine. Then I noticed the faint glow beneath my skin. A pulse of red light behind my eyes. I reached up, trembling. My fingers brushed cold metal where flesh should have been. Thin circuits traced down my temple like veins of silver. I froze. My voice broke as I whispered, "What did they do to me?" No answer came, but deep inside, something moved. Not a thought, not a feeling, a command. I stumbled through the corridors, searching for someone, anyone. The workers looked the same, hollow eyes, tired faces, moving with mechanical precision. I called out to one, but he didn't respond. I grabbed his shoulder, and when he turned, I saw it. The same glow. Every one of them had it. I stepped back, horrified, my heart pounding in my chest. Except, it wasn't my heart that was pounding. It was something deeper, synchronized with the hum of the hive itself. Every machine, every person, every thought, moving in rhythm. That's when the voices returned. Not from outside, not from above, from within. You never left. You never could. The Imperium is not a place, it is the human soul. I screamed and fell to my knees, clutching my head. Images flashed through my mind. The ship, the robed figure, the mirrors, the endless prayers. They weren't memories anymore. They were instructions, programs. I had been rewritten. Slowly, I began to remember who I was supposed to be. My name, my role, my duty. Scribe Theta 9942. Faithful servant of the Emperor. But beneath that new obedience, another voice whispered, my real voice. The one that had once dared to ask what if I just left. It begged me to fight, to resist, to remember. I couldn't tell which was real anymore. The world flickered, hive walls fading into the glowing corridors of the ecliptic sanctum. My reflection split, one face human, the other machine. You cannot escape what you are, the robed figure's voice whispered, echoing in both worlds. You belong to the Imperium, body, mind, and soul. I tried to run, but every direction led back to the same corridor, the same door, the same flickering light. I wasn't running through a hive. I wasn't on a ship. I was running through the system itself. And every step I took only brought me deeper inside it. My breath grew shallow. The glow in my eyes brightened until it swallowed everything. The whispers faded into a single, perfect silence. When I opened my eyes again, I was sitting at a desk. A data slate before me. My hands moved automatically, typing reports, recording numbers. Just another day in the endless bureaucracy of the Imperium. Around me, millions more did the same, an ocean of obedience, every keystroke a prayer. For a moment, I thought I remembered something, a face, a ship, a feeling of wanting to be free. But it slipped away, dissolving into the hum of machines. And then, as if on instinct, I whispered under my breath. The Emperor protects. The words came naturally, like breathing. Like I'd always said them. A faint smile touched my lips. The system hummed approvingly. Somewhere, deep within the network of the Imperium's machine spirit, another log entry appeared. Subject reclaimed. Scribe Theta 9942. Status: faith restored. Deviation: corrected. And far away, on a ship that shouldn't exist, a bronze-masked figure turned from its altar and whispered to no one. Even when they escape, they serve. The hum of the hive swelled, endless, eternal. Because in the Imperium of Man, there is no outside. There is no beyond. There is no freedom. There is only the Emperor.